September 27, 2025. Under the cover of darkness in the Caribbean, the United States launched a direct strike on the operations of two of the world's most dangerous cartels, Venezuela's Tren de Aragua and Mexico's Sinaloa. They appeared to be ordinary merchant ships, but inside they carried 40 tons of narcotics, 10 tons of fentanyl, 15 tons of methamphetamine, and 15 tons of cocaine. On American streets, the drugs were worth more than $7 billion, enough poison to devastate entire cities. On board were nearly 40 cartel gunmen, armed with AK-103 rifles, RPK light machine guns, and Glock sidearms. Even worse, 5 hostages, women and children, were chained below deck, bound for global human trafficking networks. But the ocean betrayed them. 10 U.S. Navy RHIBs carrying 60 sailors, armed with M4A1 carbines, MK-48 machine guns, and M110 sniper rifles, closed in from every direction. Overhead, an MH-60S Seahawk helicopter circled with its GAU-21 heavy machine gun trained on the smugglers. Would U.S. Special Forces succeed in breaking the deal, or would the cartels escape into the night? At exactly 3:10 a.m., the Caribbean seemed calm, but beneath that calm, a storm was brewing. 120 nautical miles southeast of Puerto Rico, 2 cargo ships drifted together in the darkness, meeting at an unmarked trading point in the open ocean. One belonged to Tren de Aragua, a Venezuelan crime syndicate that had evolved from prison gangs into a multinational terror machine. The other, sailing from the west, was under the flag of the Sinaloa cartel, Mexico's most powerful drug empire. This was no ordinary encounter. It was the largest narcotics transaction ever attempted on the high seas, a deal years in the making. Inside the steel hold of the Venezuelan ship lay 40 tons of poison, 10 tons of fentanyl, enough to produce 5 billion lethal doses, 15 tons of methamphetamine, shimmering crystals under dim lights, 15 tons of pure Colombian cocaine packed so tightly it looked like white bricks stacked from floor to ceiling. The total street value, $7 billion, enough to poison entire American cities. On deck, 20 armed enforcers from each cartel paced nervously, their fingers wrapped around AK-103s and RPKs. These weren't smugglers. They were soldiers of crime bound by greed and brutality. Their mission was simple: exchange billions in cash for drugs, then push the poison north through Sinaloa's distribution network. For years, the two syndicates had cooperated in the shadows, but tonight was different. For the first time, they chose the open ocean. No streets, no borders, no police, only black waves and the illusion of safety. To them, it was the perfect plan. What they didn't know was that American eyes were already watching. From satellites in orbit, from drones circling at altitude, from quiet electronic intercepts, U.S. intelligence had been following every signal, every encrypted message, every move. As the first bundles of narcotics were dragged onto the deck, the counter-operation plan days earlier tightened like a noose. The night had only just begun. As the two cartel ships drifted closer, they believed the ocean itself was their shield. They were wrong. For 48 hours, U.S. naval intelligence had tracked every suspicious transmission and radar echo on the water. Every clue pointed to this moment, a multi-billion-dollar narcotics handoff at sea. If the exchange succeeded, 40 tons of poison would surge north, flooding American streets and fueling over 15 million deals, 15 million sparks of addiction, 15 million chances for death. Allowing it to pass was unthinkable. The intercept plan was precise. From the deck of the USS New York, a San Antonio-class amphibious ship stationed 10 nautical miles away, Orders crackled over encrypted channels. 10 RHIBs slid silently into the sea, each carrying 5 or 6 sailors and special operators armed with M4A1 carbines, MK48s, and M110 sniper rifles set for overwatch. Nearly 60 men were converging from all sides. Above them, an MH-60S Seahawk hovered 600 feet up its searchlights, ready to turn night into day. Gunners manned GAU 2150 caliber machine guns, while spotters relayed every movement below. This wasn't brute force, it was choreography. Timing, discipline, and absolute precision. Each RHIB throttled down just outside the target zone, drifting silently while sailors checked magazines and optics. Radios hissed 3 words, "Hold the line." On the cartel ship, crates of narcotics were hoisted into view, stacks of cash beside them. On the horizon, the faint whine of rotors grew louder. What Tren de Aragua and Sinaloa thought was a safe haven had become a trap, and the American fist was about to close. Could the U.S. Navy really destroy a $7 billion empire right here on the water? At 3:28 a.m., silence shattered. The Seahawk's searchlight sliced through the dark, flooding the deck in white brilliance. A voice thundered through loudspeakers, "U.S. Navy, lay down your weapons. Surrender immediately." For a heartbeat, the cartel gunman froze. Then came defiance. A mounted DSHK heavy machine gun opened fire 600 rounds per minute, ripping through the night. Sinaloa shooters joined in their AKs and RPKs, spitting tracer rounds wildly into the air. The SEACOM seconds earlier erupted into chaos. The Americans answered instantly. 10 RHIBs surged forward at 40 knots, MK48s blazing. Sparks exploded over the waves. Navy snipers with M110 rifles picked off targets with cold precision. One shot, one drop. Within 5 minutes, more than 1,200 U.S. rounds had been fired. Bullets punched through the narco ship's hull as cartel fighters screamed and fell. A gunman shouldered an RPG-7 and fired. The rocket screamed past a RHIB, missing by 15 feet before exploding harmlessly in the sea. The spray soaked the sailors, but they held their aim. Above them, the Seahawk's .50 caliber roared. A single burst shredded the cartel's machine gun nest, cutting down 3 fighters and silencing the DSHK. Grenades clattered across the deck. A sailor was hit by shrapnel, but kept firing, blood running down his arm. By 3:41 a.m., the ship was burning in patches. The gunfire slowed. More than a dozen cartel enforcers lay dead among the smoldering crates of drugs. Surrounded and out of ammunition, panic set in. Radios screamed for backup that would never come. The U.S. Navy pressed forward. Each RHIB drew closer, muzzles steady, while the Seahawk's searchlight followed every twitch. What began as a demand for surrender had become a storm of fire and steel. The narco soldiers of Tren de Aragua and Sinaloa were being crushed. By 3:52 a.m., the decks were slick with seawater and blood. The surviving fighters dropped their weapons and raised trembling hands. The order came, boarding teams go. RHIBs slammed against the steel hull. Hooks flew, ladders clanged. Within seconds, 30 sailors were swarming the ship rifles, sweeping left and right. The cartel fighters were thrown face down, wrists bound with zip ties. Below deck, the discovery was worse than anyone expected. In the forward hold, the drugs, 40 tons in total, stacked floor to ceiling. But in a locked compartment, sailors broke down a reinforced door and found 5 hostages, 3 women and 2 children chained and terrified. The rescue was immediate. Medics wrapped them in blankets and carried them into the cool night air. One child clung so tightly to a sailor's uniform that he refused to let go even after being placed on a rescue boat. Once the evidence was secured, the final order came down the chain of command. The ship, too damaged and too dangerous to tow, would be destroyed. Explosives were set along the hull. Minutes later, controlled detonations lit the sky. A billion-dollar fortress turned into molten steel and smoke. Cartel prisoners sat handcuffed on the RHIBs, staring at the inferno that had once been their empire. For them, the war was over. For America, it was a message. By dawn, the Caribbean was calm again. Smoke curled into the sunrise, a black scar across the horizon. The numbers told the story: 40 tons of narcotics, seized $7 billion, erased 5 hostages, rescued 30 cartel gunmen, captured dozens, killed or wounded. For the U.S. Navy, it was a flawless strike. For the cartels, it was annihilation. But what came next was even more alarming. Intelligence recovered from hard drives and phones revealed international connections, bank transfers exceeding $50 million, shell companies in Panama and Curaçao, encrypted correspondence with European contacts, and even hints of weapons shipments moving in the opposite direction. Tren de Aragua and Sinaloa weren't just trafficking drugs. They were building a global network designed to bleed America's streets and destabilize its allies. Had the shipment reached U.S. shores, it could have fueled an overdose crisis, measured not in hundreds, but in tens of thousands. 1 ton of fentanyl can produce 450 million lethal doses. This ship carried 10. The devastation would have been biblical. And so the message was clear, not just to these cartels, but to every criminal syndicate that believes the ocean is their shield. Attack America's borders with poison, and the response will not be symbolic. It will be decisive. It will strike at sea, in the air, and, if necessary, at the very heart of their empires. But the warning carries a darker question. If 2 cartels acting alone could marshal this much firepower and narcotics, what happens when a hostile state bankrolls them with 10 times the resources? What happens when the next merchant ship carries not drugs, but missiles? The oceans are watching. America cannot afford to blink. The night of September 27, 2025, will not be forgotten. What began as a secret meeting between 2 of the world's most ruthless cartels ended in flames, shattered steel, and chains on their wrists. The Tren de Aragua syndicate, born in Venezuela's prisons, and the Sinaloa cartel, Mexico's narco giant, believed the sea would hide them. Instead, the sea became their grave. The statistics are staggering. 40 tons of narcotics destroyed, 10 tons of fentanyl, 15 tons of meth, 15 tons of cocaine, a street value exceeding $7 billion, 5 hostages rescued, 30 cartel fighters captured alive, dozens more killed or wounded. An alliance that had thrived in shadows exposed before the world. These are not just numbers. They are lives, saved communities, protected futures reclaimed. But victory is only half the story. The intelligence seized proved a terrifying truth. These cartels are no longer simple gangs. They are quasi-armies equipped, funded, and capable of destabilizing entire nations if left unchecked. The world is learning the same lesson America already knows. The seas are no longer neutral. They are a battlefield. If criminal empires can move billions in drugs under cover of night, imagine what hostile states might attempt with weapons or explosives. The only shield is vigilance. The only answer is strength. The oceans remember what happened that night. They remind us all that freedom must be defended. We must never close our eyes. If you believe America's strength must never be silenced, then show your support. Like this video, share it, and subscribe to our channel. Because only together can we keep these untold stories alive.